Hello there. This morning, Keir Starmer gave a press release about the upcoming Southport inquiry, where he basically admitted he knew loads of details before the rest of us did, and I wonder what sort of impact that had. And when you watch these press conferences, you wish you could reply immediately to it. Well, what we're going to do is play it back, and Richard and I, when I can get him into the picture, and we will interject with our thoughts on it as we play it. So I'll go straight in and we'll start watching it now. He said, "Well, look,
cut the pieces of their lives. They chose to rebuild. The senseless, barbaric murder of 3 young girls in Southport is a devastating moment in our history. No words come anywhere close to expressing the brutality and horror in this case. Every parent in Britain will have had the same thought. It could have been anywhere. It could have been our children. But it was Southport. It was Bibi, 6 years old. Elsie, 7. Alice, 9. Back in August, I said there would be a time for questions, but that first justice had to be done.
Oh.
And that
Here he goes.
Yeah,
sorry, Jeff. I just find it incredibly annoying. You can see that he's lining this up for excuses. That's all he's doing.
Yeah.
That's all he's doing is basically this has the appearance of a cover-up, to be honest with you, or the introduction of a cover-up. So he's sort of laying the foundations here of the fact that everyone was very upset. Of course we were upset. Of course every parent in this land thought it could be my child, or it could have been. Just continue, please, Jeff.
above all, we must not interfere with the work of the police, the prosecutors, and the delivery of that justice.
I'm sorry, but he held stuff back. And as far as I'm concerned, holding stuff back is interfering with it all so that we don't know what's going on. And the repercussions of holding back and not giving us information were far-reaching as far as I'm concerned.
Yes, but didn't he? I mean, wasn't information released very quickly after the Manchester incident? I mean,
yeah,
the Manchester bombing. I'm sorry, very strange. Yeah. Carry on, Jeff.
Yeah, it's very selective.
Well, yesterday, thankfully, a measure of justice was done, but it won't bring those girls back to their families, and it won't remove the trauma from the lives of those who were injured. Their lives will never be the same. So before I turn to the questions that must now be answered, for the families and the nation, I first want to recognise their unimaginable grief, because I know the whole country grieves for them.
Pause. Sorry. I just find, yes, of course, the entire nation grieved and was angry and upset. That's why people took to the streets to protest. We're not talking about the rioters, but we'll get onto that in a minute. But I mean, again, this is just laying down. This is almost like emotional manipulation. A point of view he's presenting right now for everyone to listen to. His point of view as the just, sensible person in the room. He's trying to place himself as the adult in the room, okay?
Yeah.
And that his actions were based on reason and sound judgment and nothing else. Yeah. Look away, people. Please continue, Jeff.
The tragedy of the Southport killings must be a line in the sand for Britain. We must make sure the names of those 3 young girls are not associated with the vile perpetrator, but instead with a fundamental change in how Britain protects its citizens and its children. In pursuit of that, we must, of course, ask and answer difficult questions, questions that should be far-reaching, unburdened by cultural or institutional sensitivities.
Pause.
Oh, Yes, exactly. Just as I pressed the button, you said pause. Exactly. I'll tell you what, that as soon as his inquiry comes up against a certain demographic, it's going to go bang and stop. It will go no further. Yeah. And the institutions are right now beginning to shred evidence. They're going to get rid of loads of stuff, and they've already got their stories concocted. It's not going to work. The society is broken, and that's the problem.
Yes, well, as soon as he said unburdened, it was almost like unburdened by what has gone before. I thought, am I listening to Kamala Harris here for a second?
Yeah.
I'm sorry. I just find it really. You can, as I said, please continue. Please continue. You said what I was going to say. Actually.
And driven only by the pursuit of justice. That is what we owe the families. The responsibility for this barbaric act lies, as it always does, with the vile individual who carried it out.
Pause. Sorry. What about the motivation of the vile individual who carried it out? No mention of that. Well, we can't talk about that. We can't talk about that. Sorry. Of course. Well, continue, please.
Yeah,
Jeff.
but it goes a lot deeper than that. If it does lie with just the individual, then why are we having an inquiry which is going to look into all sorts of different things, people and failures in the system and all the rest of it, if it lies with just the individual? Yes. No, it's not society's fault. It's a government fault, and lots of people in government falling over each other to try and avoid the blame, and in the first place trying to avoid charges of racism by not doing their duty, because our society is broken. That's why, not because of us. And some of the stuff he says later really gets up my nose.
Yeah, the thing is as well, though, what you're finding here is we have individuals with ideological, potentially demographical commonality. I'll say no more. Please continue, Jeff.
Yeah.
But that is no comfort. And more importantly, it is no excuse. And so, as part of the inquiry launched by the Home Secretary yesterday, I will not let any institution of the state deflect from their failure. Failure which, in this case, frankly, leaps off the page. For example, the perpetrator was referred to the PREVENT programme on 3 separate occasions.
3 separate occasions. And we're only just finding out in the last couple of days. I do know that the press and various other people did know about all of this first. But, this is total failure by the state. It's no good going around saying, lessons will be learnt. I don't think they will. This is just going to be another long, drawn-out Hillsborough affair as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah. Kicking it into the long grass.
Deflecting blame from those who should hold the blame.
Yeah, totally.
In 2019, once, and in 2021, twice. Yet on each of these occasions, a judgment was made that he did not meet the threshold for intervention, a judgment that was clearly wrong and which failed those families. And I acknowledge that here today.
Pause. Sorry, what do you mean didn't
throughout this case,
Jeff,
to this point?
What about didn't meet the threshold of intervention? What's that about?
Well, when you have these PREVENT things and people get referred, they have a look at all the reports and then say we don't need to intervene.
Okay, so that's this is my point. Clearly, this threshold isn't set correctly. Then let's just say that.
Well, I think that's what he
can fall through the net. If he can fall through the net. Sorry, it means nothing. It means absolutely nothing.
Yeah, but at least he will go on to say that that's one of the things they're going to address. But first, thanks very much, MJV. Repercussions led to Peter Lynch's death. Yes, as far as I'm concerned, that was one of the big repercussions. He is one of the victims of all of this.
Yes.
And also, Michael O'Mahony, justice isn't real if we can't protect the children. That's absolutely right. Absolutely right. Anyway, I'll continue with the video.
We have only been focused on justice. If this trial had collapsed because I or anyone else had revealed crucial details while the police were investigating, while the case was being built, while we were awaiting a verdict, then the vile individual who committed these crimes would have walked away a free man.
Isn't it funny how the evidence was so overwhelming, it seems, that there was no chance he could even put up an official defence because it just wouldn't, it seems, have worked. That's as far as I understand it. I may be wrong, but as far as I understand it, the case was so watertight, there was nothing he could do. So what would have collapsed that case in reality, really? You know, I don't understand this at all.
I mean,
he's using
he's using the mechanics of the justice system to justify not coming out and saying what needed to be said. Now that we know what's coming out, I mean, I'm going to do that horrible devil's advocate thing here, which I don't want to do, but maybe the reason that he has withheld information until now, or at least in the initial period after the response, the uprising, we'll say, after these hideous deaths, maybe if it had been released earlier, the response would have been stronger, because we can see potentially what his the framing of his ideological background was, okay, and his motivation potentially. So if that was the case, and you've got people heading towards, let's just say, a certain place of worship for retribution, it might have been seen to, that releasing of that information might have been seen to have justified it. I hate to use that term, but I mean, is that in his mind what he believed would have happened? There could have been justification.
I don't know.
Yeah,
no,
I'm just trying to get into the mind of this lunatic.
That's what he would argue. That's exactly what he would argue. Say, well, if I'd let all this out, you'd have all been down there rioting. Well, that's not the case, really. If he'd come out and said, this is the case, but we're going to follow it through hard, then maybe people would have said, right, okay, and we'll watch you. He just clouded it all in secrecy.
The prospect of justice destroyed for the victims and their families. I would never do that. And nobody would ever forgive me if I had. That is why the law of this country forbade me or anyone else from disclosing details sooner. Nonetheless, it is now time for those questions. And the first of those is whether this was a terrorist attack. The blunt truth here is that this case is a sign. Britain now faces a new threat. Terrorism has changed. In the past, the predominant threat was highly organised groups with clear political intent, groups like Al-Qaeda. That threat, of course, remains. But now, alongside that, we also...
he knew that, and he just mentioned Al-Qaeda, but he knew that this individual had downloaded from an Al-Qaeda manual, okay? So doesn't that have a slight whiff of terrorism about it? You know, would it be too great a stretch of the imagination to draw some parallels between terrorism and the acts of Axel Rudikabana? I mean, I'm not saying he was a terrorist, because I don't even know if I can actually say that right now, if it was terrorism or not. I mean, is the Prime Minister saying this is terrorism now? Or is he saying, the terrorism has changed, but we don't know? He's too frightened of the terminology, because the repercussions of using such terminology in this hideous case means that people could get angry, because they're going to say, all right, this is terrorism. What's the ideological background on that? And I have to quickly do something here, Jeff. Going to the Daily Telegraph here, Alison Pearson said, I'm not surprised the full horror of the Southport massacre won't be heard. And it goes on, she does, to say that we won't know the actual ideological motivation behind it now. That seems to have been buried. Why are they trying to hide that? What could somebody's motive for hiding the ideological motivation be? Can't think what that would be,
Well,
Jeff. Please continue.
Well, this is the whole point. If there is a threat out there, we need to know.
Yes.
And we need to know what's being done to combat it. At the moment, all I get is, one of the things here, this comment from Fat Belly, 40,000 more threats walking the street. What are they doing about them? Oh, no, we're just going to let them wander the street and hope we've got enough MI5 officers to watch about, I don't know, 1 in 1,000 of them. Yeah? And that means that what are we doing with all this stuff? Our society is broken. And I keep saying that our society is broken because we're not a cohesive single society with a single major faith and a single major political belief in this country. We have been fragmented, and that's what leads to division, and that's what leads to things like Southport and all this trying to wander around and meander around the problems, or the main problem, is never going to solve it. And I know this inquiry, I'll tell you what this inquiry will come back with. It's rooted in racism.
Oh, yeah. They'll be blaming the far right for this. You have no doubt.
Oh, yeah.
Please continue with this, Jeff.
Anyway,
I can only
see acts of extreme violence perpetrated by loners, misfits, young men in their bedroom, accessing all manner of material online, desperate for notoriety, sometimes inspired by traditional terrorist groups, but fixated on that extreme violence, seemingly for its own sake.
Pause. Sorry, pause. Now, there he is going straight in and saying that this is, these are confused young men potentially in their bedrooms all by themselves. Look, granted, there's going to be an element of that, obviously. But the problem is, though, he's skirting around the elephant in the room. There's an elephant in the room. What is the motivation behind the people who are on most of our terrorist watch lists right now? Okay, who are MI5 looking at right now? Is it the far right? Are they the greatest concern of MI5 right now? That's the question I want to ask. Why can't he just say we might have an issue with something else here? Why won't he name it? Notice I'm not naming it. I want him to name it. Please continue, Jeff.
Yeah, I'll just say thank you to GW. The king must step up or the monarchy needs to go.
Totally.
Well, that's what one of the themes we've had. And Mike Hipperson, thank you very much. I hope that somebody has the stones to ask Starmer what he knew before he laid the wreaths in Southport during tomorrow's PMQs. Actually, he was asked by the press about this, and we'll come on to that. But it will be interesting to see tomorrow's PMQs if anyone asks any questions about it. Remember, they're all on the same hymn sheet, that lot. All of them, except for the few in Reform UK, maybe. Everyone else, they want this multiculturalism problem they want the problems to continue because that's the way multiculturalism works. They love it. Anyway.
It may well be that people like this are harder to spot, but we can't shrug our shoulders and accept that. We can't have a national security system that fails to tackle people who are a danger to our values, our security, our children. We have to be ready to face every threat. And when I look through the details of this case, the extreme nature of the violence, the meticulous plan to attack young children in a place of joy and safety, violence clearly intended to terrorise, then I understand why people wonder what the word terrorism means. And so if the law needs to change to recognise this new and dangerous threat, then we will change it, and quickly.
Yeah, this what's happening now is we're going to start clouding this whole idea of terrorist groups and terrorism, because the whole idea of terrorist groups is to achieve a political aim. And now what we're going to do is we're going to say individuals who do various things are involved in doing that as well. So that will apply to the far right doing certain things, going on certain protests. They'll be added to the list. This is going in a dangerous direction, as you'll see in a while. They go start talking about the internet, and the dangers of it, and it's all beginning to look like we're heading towards more control, less Elon Musk, and more of these nudge units in Downing Street that we got used to during the health emergency. Anyway, I'll continue.
And we will also review our entire counter-extremist system to make sure we have what we need to defeat it. Now, that work is already underway. I've tasked Sir David Anderson Casey, the new independent Prevent Commissioner, to hold this system to account, to shine a light into its darkest corners, so the British people can have confidence that action will follow words. But I have to say, to face up to this new threat, there are also bigger questions. Questions such as how we protect our children from the tidal wave of violence freely available online.
There you go. The tide of violence available online. And that's where it starts, ladies and gentlemen. We are going to usher in, this is going to be used to usher in a new age of censorship. Be in no doubt.
Yes.
Be in no doubt. And a lot of people out there will say, if it protects the children, so be it. But the best way of protecting children is having a country that promotes family life, promotes adult child, proper father, mother, child interactions. That's what we need. And we haven't got that as far as I can see at the moment. It's everybody for themselves. Parents are working so hard they can't stay at home. Everything gets handed over to childminders. And you've got to remember, the government loves childminders because it takes the children out of the hands of the parents. And we should have parents should be nurturing their children. That's what they're there for.
Yeah, Jeff, this is opportunistic. This is hideous what he's doing right now. He is using one of the most saddest events in our nation's history, okay? Something which has been was broadcast in the consciousness of the entire nation, in our psyche, and it will be for a very long time. And we should not forget. I'll agree with him on that. We should not forget what's happened here. But he's then using that to usher in, by the looks of it, new draconian measures.
Yeah.
I mean, this is just evil as far as I'm concerned. If that's what he's doing, I can't say he's doing that for definite, but that's what it appears he is doing.
Yeah. Yes.
Jeff, carry on there.
Thanks very much, Sham. Thank you for your contribution.
Yeah, thank you.
Yes. So let me continue if I can find the right button.
Because you can't tell me that the material this individual viewed before committing these murders should be accessible on mainstream social media platforms? That with just a few clicks, people can watch video after horrific video. Videos that in some cases are never taken down. No, that cannot be right. But it's not just the nightmares of the online world. Because when you wake from a nightmare, the first thing you do is reassure yourself with reality. But for far too many people, the state of our society no longer does that. Now, people will say this is all because of immigration.
Well, I think he's answered his own question there, to be honest. It's about the breakdown of society. As I keep saying, we have broken our society because what have we done? We told everybody British society is nothing. It doesn't matter. We need everybody else's society. Bring all your culture with you. And then when they come here and it starts fracturing our society, then we end up finding out that not integrating is a big problem. And that's what starts all this stuff
Yeah,
off.
I think his point here that he's trying, well, not his point, his ploy here is he's trying to make out that immigration is not the problem. How dare you question that? I mean, we all know that if Axel Rudakabana's parents hadn't have moved from Rwanda to Southport, we all know that if they hadn't have done that, then the Southport atrocity would have still taken place. Even if Axel Rudakabana wasn't there, it would have still taken place. This has nothing to do with immigration, by the way. So we mustn't question that, must we? No. Sorry, continue, please, Jeff.
All because of funding cuts. But in truth, neither tells us anything like the full story or explains this case properly. No. This goes deeper. A growing sense that the rights and responsibilities that we owe to one another, the set of unwritten rules that hold a nation together, have in recent years been ripped apart.
Oh dear, and what's caused that? I don't know, the far right. Isn't it? It must have been. There's no other excuse, is there? No, him and his ilk, the left wokies, have caused this sort of thing to happen. They've set in motion the whole train of events which ends up with this sort of thing. Now, I know these things have happened before, but they seem to be happening with a monotonous regularity these days, which they never used to. It used to be big news when things happened. Nowadays, it's becoming just, some of the events in London go without even mention in the press.
Well, yes, I remember when, and it was awful what happened to Stephen Lawrence, when that was in the press for weeks. People were talking about this awful thing that had happened, and it was awful. You can't underplay that. At the same time, now we live in a society where that's happening multiple times a day. And we've become desensitized to the evil that is taking place and the complete breakdown in society, especially in our inner cities, places like London. It's awful. Awful, mate.
Yeah.
Children who've stopped going to school since the pandemic. Young people who've opted out of work or education. More and more people retreating into parallel lives.
Oh, I can't believe
this bloody ridiculous waffle he's talking about here. That's all this is. Absolute nonsense. It's waffle. It means nothing. It means nothing.
When you say waffle, what he's actually doing is describing a society that's falling apart. That's what he's describing, where people go their own way, where they no longer trust the state because they're fed up with what they're being fed at school. Not food. I'm talking about with this woke education that redescribes the whole of the United Kingdom as if you and I were never here, or our forefathers were never here, or whatever. It's just
straight into this.
He's part of the problem.
Oh, exactly. He's going straight into this waffle, talking. Oh, it's all about this, that, and the other. It's like, right, can we now have a little conversation, Mr. Starmer? Why don't you actually say what the real cause of what the problem is? What actually happened? What was the ideological motivation? That's going to be brushed under the carpet now, that is.
Yes.
Yes. I can't say what it is. I mean, maybe he just happened to be looking at Al-Qaeda manuals, but he had a completely different ideological motivation. I don't know. We can't say, can we? We can't say things that we are hearing because you and I, Jeff, have heard things as well. We can't say them. Not that it'll prejudice a trial, but because, well, we're not allowed to say them. Linked with this case, things that, anyway. Sorry.
Well, thanks, Michael O'Mahony. The lion has died and they're kicking its corpse. Yes, well, it's not, the lion was actually killed off they're trying to kill it off with the woke establishment. They hate it. They detest it with a passion. They detest British way of life with a passion. Yeah, but we all know that. Anyway.
Yeah. Whether through failures of integration, or just a country slowly turning away from itself. Wounds that politics for all that it may have contributed, must try to heal. Thirdly,
I've got to stop it there. I know what the healing will mean. It will mean more woke, much more woke, more DEI. Exactly the opposite of what Donald Trump is doing in America. And by the way, we're going to be doing a video on that later on. But we thought this one, that's why we were a bit delayed. We were planning to do that one when this particular press conference came up. And as I was watching it, I got more and more angry. Anyway.
There are also questions about the accountability of the Whitehall and Westminster system, a system that is far too often driven by circling the institutional wagons, that does not react until justice is either hard won by campaigners or until appalling tragedies like this finally spur.
Justice hard won by campaigners. Yes. Funny that. There's a lot of people who have been campaigning for justice over the groomers, and they want a full investigation and inquiry about this. What's gone on? You don't want it though, Keir. Yvette Cooper doesn't want it. It has to be at a local level. Oh, of course. Where I'm not going to. I can't say anymore because I might prejudice that investigation. You can't say anything. You might prejudice. You might affect the outcome by speaking. Don't speak. Outcomes are more important. He's a lawyer. That's all he is. He's a solicitor, and he's basically viewing the world through a solicitor's eyes. But worse than that, it's a far left-wing woke lawyer. And that is like the most dangerous of two worlds colliding. Please continue.
There's no vision. There's no vision there. All it is this is the law and we must comply. That's it. And to the letter. Absolutely everything. No vision. No, let's change things. He'll wait for the inquiry.
A degree of action. Time and again, we see this pattern. And people are right to be angry about it. I'm angry about it. Southport must be a line in the sand. So nothing will be off the table in this inquiry. Nothing. And most importantly,
I reckon when the inquiry gets to the demographic problem, when it gets there, it will do a very, very fast about turn, because the result must be rooted in racism, mustn't it? So it cannot point a finger at any other demographic. It won't. It just won't.
No, Jeff, I disagree there. I disagree. I can see the way he's framing this. He's pushing this. This will not be about racism. This will be about confused individuals who are able to get radicalized by just going on the internet. Just by watching SpongeBob, they'll get radicalized. Anyone who is not far left is now far right. And that's the way it goes. So, and it's extremist in the eyes of Starmer. This is hideous. I mean, right now, I can imagine Donald Trump and Elon Musk, because they will be watching this morning. They'll be watching this and they'll be thinking, "Oh my goodness!" Well, first of all, he's admitting he knew the facts behind what happened in Southport, and they'll be thinking, "We have to deal with this man. Hasn't he done enough? Hasn't he covered enough up with the groomers?" Anyway, please continue. I need to stop rambling here. I'm getting too angry.
It will lead to change. I know people will be watching right now, and they'll be saying, "We've heard all this before."
Yes.
The promises, the sorrow, the inquiry that comes and goes, an inability to change that, frankly, has become the oxygen of wider conspiracy. And we've seen that throughout this case. A suggestion that there has been a cover-up.
I had to stop it there. A suggestion that there's been a cover-up when he knew stuff but wouldn't say anything right at the beginning. And I reckon a lot of what he could have said, and the press will be asking later, that a lot of what he could have said would not have prejudiced any trial. And there was no need to gag Parliament, was there? No need at all. They could have asked questions. And in fact, I'm very disappointed in a lot of them that they didn't ask questions. But there you go.
I want to put on record that yesterday's guilty verdict only happened because hundreds, if not thousands, of dedicated public servants worked towards it, many of whom endured absolutely harrowing circumstances, particularly in the police and the Crown Prosecution Service. That is their job. They are brilliant at it. But we should never forget their service to our country.
Pause.
For an order depends.
Sorry, again, a reframing. This is what he's doing. You need to understand the way he's framing this. He's framing this. If you have any conspiratorial thoughts about this, and if you question the process and the way that this was handled, then you are disregarding the wonderful work of our public servants who went through awful things after Southport. Of course they did. Of course they did. And it is their job, unfortunately, that they have to be exposed to some pretty bloody awful things. Okay, but here he's opportunistically reframing that to say, if you have a conspiracy theory about a cover-up, then oh my gosh, then shame on you, because all you're doing is you're putting down the hard work of all those people working in the background to make sure all this came about and justice has been done. Yeah, okay.
Yeah, but didn't he say earlier that up until now, every single institution has been playing the old sort of rearguard action to protect themselves all the time, to deflect anything? So we know that has been going on during this case. It's been going on with the groomer gangs. It's everything. It's been going on throughout. We know that. And it just seems to me that everything is being put in place to keep that ring fencing going on, to circle the wagons again. Anyway.
And on them. And yet I'm under no illusions that until the wider state shows the country it can change, not just what it delivers for people, but also its culture, then this atmosphere of mistrust will remain. So I want to be crystal clear in front of the British people today. We will leave no stone unturned. I was the prosecutor who first spotted failures in grooming cases in my institution, the CPS, 14 years ago.
Yes, you were also the head of the CPS when Mr. Savile was running about with his antics, weren't you? Yes.
Yes.
Yes, we remember your fantastic track record, sir. We thank you for your service. Please continue.
And I was the prosecutor who first did something about it by bringing the rape gangs in Rochdale to justice. And so my approach as Prime Minister will be no different. If any shortcomings are now holding back the ability of this country to keep its citizens and its children safe, I will find them and I will root them out.
Does that include all those councils out there?
Yes.
And all those local authorities that were all, because he's putting this all together, isn't he? He's sort of talking about the whole general concept. It's not just about this case. It's also about all of it. And he's trying to say that he's going to change the whole lot. He's not going to change anything. I keep saying once he comes up against that demographic rock, he will balk at it. It will stop. Everything will stop there.
Because when it comes to justice, the failure to be transparent is not only disgraceful on its own terms, it is also the enemy of strong communities. It spreads suspicion more widely and allows division to win. I remember when this happened, in those dark days of the summer. And I remember that, like now, the whole country grieved for Southport. But I also remember how it was profoundly moved by their example. Because even as that community faced an unimaginable evil, even as they had to endure mindless violence, bricks and bottles thrown at their community, their businesses, their mosque, police officers attacked, including those who are on the scene responding to this vile murder. Even despite all of that, they chose to come together.
So we're going to all come together and basically just ignore what went on, are we? This is, I'm not sure what the message is here. Yes, people did go in and help and rebuild various things that were attacked by mindless violence, wielders, whatever. And that was wrong. But that was a situation that got there because society is broken. That would never have happened if we had a cohesive society, because people would have trusted each other. Communities would trust each other. And right now, that has gone, and none of us seem to trust the state anymore. So, yeah, I know where he's going with this. This
community rebuilding thing. I'm sorry, I'm just... Again, it's the framing. He's just going to say, look, everyone came together against... He's stopping himself short now because he knows he can't use the term far right again, but he is stopping himself short, saying that the communities came together to protect everyone and to come together in a big loving blanket against the far right. Yes, to protect everyone that had been hurt by the far right. That's what he wants to say, but he now knows that he just sounds stupid. Oh, well, he's been told, don't say that stupid thing anymore.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. Yeah, that's what he's intimating. It's all the fault of the far right, basically. That's what, it's... you can't say that it's the fault of anyone else, any other demographic, but there you go.
They chose to pick up the pieces of their lives. They chose to rebuild, brick by brick, side by side. Strangers no longer strangers. A community.
Hang on,
this
Paul.
country has
Strangers
no shortage
longer
of empathy.
strangers. They weren't a community in the first place, then, were they? What are you talking about? This is another word salad. It means nothing. Absolute gibberish. Absolute rubbish. Just many, many more platitudes after platitudes after platitudes being thrown at us. Yes, forget the truth. Forget the truth. This isn't a cover-up. This isn't a cover-up. Conspiracy theory cover-up. Please continue, Jeff.
For the people of Southport. I know that. But in the face of such darkness and tragedy, what we really should do is follow their example. That is what we need to face this new threat. But also something more. Because national renewal isn't just about public services or the economy. It's about turning us back towards ourselves, giving people confidence in a shared future. So people...
I cannot believe this person is spouting something that he's been fighting against all his life. He's now talking about building a culture, a single one, is he not? When he's been fighting for multiculturalism just about all his life, wokeism. And now he's expecting us to think that he wants to rebuild something. Is he talking about rebuilding a society?
No.
Well, it's been torn apart by people like him and the Tories and the Lib Dems and the Greens and the SNP.
This single culture that he's talking about is wokeism. That's the culture. That's the culture he wants. That's it. That's the extent of it, of what he can comprehend a culture to be. Or a decent one, anyway, in his mind.
Yeah, well, the only way to rebuild a country and a culture is not to go down the woke route. That's the worst route, because that is a divisive route. And he should have worked that out by now. In fact, he might have done, maybe.
People can once again see the strength and power in themselves and in this nation. But that can only begin today, by holding up the mirror and facing what we see.
Ah, now we're getting to it. So it's our fault. We have to hold the mirror up to ourselves. It's not that body over there. It's not that institution. It's not that person with the power. It's not the woke people. It's none of that.
Yeah, it's not that demographic. That's what he's trying to say. It's not that demographic. It's our fault. This is us. We need to all come together, sing Kumbaya, and forget about an issue that we might have in this country.
Yep.
So wherever this inquiry goes, we will follow it. No matter the boats it will rock, no matter the vested interests it will threaten, we won't hide.
Yeah. What do you reckon on that?
No, just meaningless platitudes again. He's just coming out with platitude after platitude. I'm getting numb to his voice. This is honestly,
Yes.
this is just torture.
Yeah.
Jeff, we need to get this out of the way because I
But
think
then, most importantly of all, we will act. Because this time it will be different. Southport will be a line in the sand. We will honour those 3 little girls and deliver not just justice, but the change that the people and families of Southport deserve. Thank you. I will now take a number of questions from the media.
Now, I'll leave it running because some of
Yes.
these questions are exceptionally good.
They are.
And we'll see what Starmer's response is to them, and you'll see that he's still following the same line, really.
Starting
this is great.
with Vicky Young from the BBC.
Prime Minister, you are a person with years of experience as a senior prosecutor. Do you really need a public inquiry to tell you that the system needs to change? And isn't there the possibility that that delay could mean that other dangerous cases are missed in the meantime?
Well, I think we need a public inquiry to answer all of the questions that the families, the people of Southport and the country have about this case, and to ensure that no stone is unturned, that every failure is exposed and dealt with. I also think we need an inquiry because we are dealing with a new cohort, a different threat, this individualised extreme violence.
This is just rubbish. It's a new threat. We've all known, it's like he has to have, is he so robotic, right? For him to function, the state to function, there needs to be a new definition of, I'm sure he's going to say terrorism here, okay? What? Shut up, idiot. Please continue.
Well, yeah, basically, he's saying it's a new threat. No, it's not a new threat. The threat has been there for decades. All it's done is manifest itself in a different way. This is not new. This is the old threat.
Yeah.
And all that's happened is it's become so embedded in our society that it manifests more threats every day. If we don't deal with it directly, if these people don't deal with it directly, and we're not allowed to talk about it on this platform, we can't mention it. If it's not dealt with, in 10 years' time, they will have found even more threats. And that's the problem. They are not going to address the real threat, ever.
Yeah, but he's there bleating this absolute rubbish out, saying that we have this new threat, that it's this bit of change in how we have to perceive things, right? What? As if it's a new surprise, a great revelation that there are these lone wolves out there. Just nonsense. Keep going, please, mate.
And we have to have the laws and framework in place to deal with it. But I accept your challenge. We shouldn't wait until the end of the inquiry before we start the change. And that's why already there's been a review of what happened with Prevent and the findings and learnings from that, so that the mistakes that were made then would not be made today. That is really important in reassuring the public. Why we've appointed a commissioner to look into that whole part of the apparatus, and why we will get on with some of the work we need to get on with changing, for example, the law when it comes to the framework for dealing with extreme violence. So we do need the inquiry so we have the full picture, full accountability, and every single question that the families have is properly answered in the proper way. But we need to get on with the change in the meantime, and to reassure the public that every step is being taken to protect their children. Thank you. Beth Rigby, Sky News.
Beth Rigby, Sky News, thank you. Prime Minister, it now emerges the perpetrator was known to the authorities and had been referred to Prevent, the anti-terrorism programme, 3 times. He'd had contact with the police, the courts, the justice, the youth system and mental health services. It's a catastrophic failure of the state to protect those young girls. Do you acknowledge that if that information had come out when the riots were happening, it would have provoked further outrage by the public, so you withheld information? Is that true? And do you acknowledge that whatever happens now, whatever public inquiry you carry out, this will hugely undermine trust from the public in the authorities and your government? Thank you.
Thank you, Beth. Let me be clear. Responsibility for the disorder and the violence lies with those that perpetrated it.
Pause,
really clear.
pause. Here he goes again, doubling down on this. This is all down to the individuals who perpetrate this. No responsibility of the state whatsoever. I mean, no blame, I should say, for the state whatsoever for cultivating a society where we're now in the situation that, oh my gosh, it's awful to think about and to say, but where we have a demographic that is in direct conflict with the rest of us, and where the state itself is in direct conflict with the rest of us. I'm sorry, I'm just putting a lot of words.
And that's why I keep saying society is broken, and this inquiry will not go there, other than to point, say, hold the mirror up. You're the problem. Back to us. It's going to be us that's highlighted in that inquiry. Us, ordinary Joe, ordinary far right, or always just right so far. That's what's going to happen. You can see it. Anyway, Yam's physical catalogue of media says it said it's not going to hide. They hid the truth about what happened to those little girls. Also, look deep in his face. You can see a little smug smirk. Well, all I ever see from him actually is looking like a rabbit in the headlights, especially when he came out to this little lot. You could see he looked sort of staring look of like, if they're there, they're going to ask me questions. Yeah, but, oh no, it's, yep. Anyway, I'll continue.
About that. But let me address the facts as you put them to me. There has been a failure here, and I don't intend to let any institution of the state deflect from their failures, and I acknowledge that readily here. Yes, I knew the details as they were emerging. That is the usual practice.
Well, there you go, ladies and gentlemen. He knew the details as they were emerging, not I was told a month later as they were emerging. So while the judges were handing out all those sentences to those far-right people, they were doing it for political purposes.
Well, they were, at very least, they were influenced by a highly politicized prime minister, and advantageous prime minister, I should say, more to the point.
They handed out outlandish sentences on the back of trying to stop riots, when they could have done it by just spreading information more judiciously around so that people would hold back. But the trouble is that a lot of people have got to the state, they distrust that their own government, of whatever stripe or colour, they distrust them so much they don't believe them. And this is what we've got now. We just don't believe anything they say.
In a case such as this. But you know and I know that it would not have been right to disclose those details. The only losers, if the details had been disclosed, would be the victims and the families, because it ran the risk the trial would collapse. I'm never going to do that. Never going to do that, because they deserve that justice. And only by having the rules in place can that justice be delivered as a...
The trouble is, we need to be told the truth. We need to trust our establishment, or we don't know that justice is being done. I'll ask the question, was justice done to those far-right rioters, those people who were locked up for hurty words, some of them for years? Was that justice? Justice has to be even-handed. This guy, he may be a super lawyer or whatever, he knows the wording, but I'm not sure he's grasped what justice really is.
Jeff, I'm sorry, I feel like I'm find it very difficult to comment on this video because anger is clouding my vision at everything he is saying here. This is deflection, deflection, deflection.
Yeah.
Irrelevance, word salad means nothing, and it's cooking my noodle, to be honest with you.
Well, I'll interject. There we have the legend Paul Thorpe is online. Thank you very much for watching, and thanks for your contribution as well. And a very good point here. This speech was a total disaster for Starmer. He admits it was terrorism, yet avoids the word. Free them all. No, I absolutely agree. It's just, yeah.
I'm beyond angry. We and so many of the comments, but especially thank you, Paul, for this one. That's a great one. But I mean, the comments here that are coming through as well for everyone to know is about Peter Lynch. Okay.
Yes. Yes.
Would he be with us today? Here's a question. Okay, you talk about the butterfly effect. Would Peter Lynch be here today if Axel Rudakabana's parents hadn't moved to Britain? Hadn't moved? Would Peter Lynch still be alive? That's a question for you. I don't know.
Yeah.
It's just a.
Well, I do. I will sort of postulate the idea that if one of the things that led or that Peter Lynch was involved in was political activism, because he was upset about various things and the way the country was going. If our governments over the years had actually looked after the British people, the British way of life, and all the rest of it, instead of going down their woke route, people like Peter Lynch would not have been holding placards up, would they, at various places? No. In fact, you and I, Richard, would be out of a job instantly. If we could trust the establishment and they worked for the British people, then you and I wouldn't be sat here talking.
Do you know what? I wouldn't. That's a great job. That's a great sacrifice that would be, Jeff. It'd be great to be out of a job under those circumstances.
Right.
Measure of it now has. And I wouldn't be forgiven if I had. Those are not just my choices, though it is a choice I would make. It is also the law of the land. That is why I couldn't disclose the details. It's why others couldn't disclose the details. It's why all of you as journalists couldn't disclose the details, because the same laws applied to you just as they applied to me. And it's really important that we make that clear. But the purpose of the rule is to protect the justice that the families and the victims are entitled to. I think that's the right thing. It is now right, having got to this stage, that the questions are asked and the answers are given.
Pause.
Right. Once again, we're talking about justice. And I'll come back to the rioters, or whatever you want to call them, the people with the hurty words. Was justice meted out to them, or were they made an example of? Is being made an example of justice? If he is saying that it was done to, that sort of thing was done to, it was done on a political basis to ram a message home, then it's not justice. It is just political expedience. And if you're going to do that, then don't talk about justice in other ways. It's either justice or it's not.
Pause. Keep pausing there a second. The thing which I'm finding very consistent in what he's saying is he's constantly reframing this is the justice for the families, etc., etc. Of course, we want justice for the families. That is an incredibly important thing. But does that mean that full transparency should not have been put in place? Does the prevention of other families potentially losing loved ones because of overreaction to what took place in Southport, does that not matter? This is very, very bad for him, this whole video. I agree with Paul Thorpe here. And yes, as Thorpe said, is that release our political prisoners now. Release them. You have just admitted something horrific, Mr. Starmer, that you knew something that could have changed the course of action of the past couple of months, could have changed the course of actions that took place during the summer. Please continue, Jeff.
Yeah, Yam's physical catalogue of media. Thank you again for your contribution. I want Tommy Robinson as PM. He is Howard Trump. Now, there's an idea.
Yeah,
there you go.
I'm just looking for something here. You carry on there, Jeff, but I did find something
I'll keep this running.
Which is why we've taken the course of an inquiry, but also why between now and the conclusion of the inquiry, we will happily answer any questions that are put to us. But that is why, notwithstanding that, yes, I was being kept updated, of course, I did not disclose anything that would collapse the trial and defeat justice in this case. And I don't think anybody could ever have looked the victims and their...
Right. I would never have done anything that collapsed the trial. Do you remember when Yvette Cooper put out that thing talking about the right-wing rioters, as they called them, being guilty? Do you remember that tweet?
Yes.
You know, she put out an official tweet. They're basically saying they are guilty before they went to court, and that didn't change anyone's mind. That's not going to affect anyone. Nah. Yeah. Thanks.
Well,
cameras in the eye.
Sorry, Richard.
Yes. It's difficult to read out this one. I'm going to try and I might have to reword. I don't know, but it's from Alison Pearson in the Telegraph. She says that I believe that the 28 girls in that class who were making friendship bracelets when the savage came to the door were deliberately targeted because the killer viewed them as decadent crop top wearing Western girls who loved to dance to Satan's tunes. Now, the thing is, that's suggesting there that he is part of an ideology, okay? And the thing is, there may be some credence to that after what we're finding out about Mr. Rudikabana, is that indeed he may have been of the mindset that these were decadent crop top wearing Western girls who loved to dance to Satan's tunes. Now, what ideology would push forward such a thought process? You know, what could do that, Jeff?
I don't know. Very unmentionable, isn't it? Anyway, Thank you, Yams Physical Catalogue of Media again. We're known as right because we're correct. There you go. Right, I shall continue.
If they'd ever done that. Thank you, Beth. Can I have Paul Brand, please, from ITV?
Paul Brand from ITV. Thank you, Prime Minister. All of us, as you say, as journalists, understand the risk of contempt of court, of prejudicing a trial, but we live in a different age now, don't we, where misinformation and disinformation spreads at lightning speed online. I was in Southport on the day of the attacks. There was a short window in which information could have been released before charge, before any risk of prejudicing a trial. Why didn't you do that? And do you think it was a mistake not to provide that detail then?
Firstly, let me address part of your... Look, it is true that we live in a different age in that information is now available online as well as offline. And I understand the frustration of all, but including some journalists who observe the rules and don't report what they know because they know that the law doesn't permit it and it runs the risk of collapsing a trial, only to see information online that doesn't appear to be following the same rules. And that is not acceptable. That has to be addressed and be part of what we will...
Pause. Yeah, yet again, this is a doubling down on the internet. This is going to be massive censorship on what can be... No, please, don't get me wrong here. Of course, material like what he's describing that influenced Axel Rudikabana is pure evil, right? And shouldn't be on the internet. But you know how he's going to react to this and frame this with his own personal overreach. You know where this is going.
Like this, Eddie Cool says, I was a fantastic prosecutor, but nothing went on his desk.
Yeah.
Anything that he wants to distance himself from, didn't cross his desk. Amazing, isn't it? He was perfect, except for the things that he didn't see.
Oh, he's totally Mr. Perfect.
Yeah, sorry, I've got... Yes. W8 Watt, thank you very much for your contribution. All other religions would love you to join them. Only one religion demands it. Yes. Very interesting.
I wonder which one that is. I can't think of which.
No, I can't remember.
Is that Christianity? It's that far-right Christianity religion, isn't it? Yes, of course it is.
Yeah, something like that. Yes. Anyway, let's get on with...
be looking at, because that can't be right. But in relation to the central thrust of your question, the importance of the rule about not disclosing this information is to ensure that the trial can take place and that where an individual is guilty, they're held to account, as has now happened in this case. And that is why the law carefully restricts what can be said by anyone, not just me as Prime Minister, but anybody in these circumstances. And it is done to protect the family and their victims. That is the right thing, and that is what the law requires. It's also the choice I would make to ensure that my first thoughts are about justice for the victims and their families. That, for me, is first and foremost. Yes, we can answer questions, and we are now doing so with this inquiry and everything that will happen before the end of that inquiry. That is quite right. But it is also right that the families who've been through unimaginable grief at least have the comfort now of an outcome in this particular case. And you would be putting very different questions to me if I had disclosed information and we were now faced with a decision that the trial had just collapsed and the families would never get justice. You would rightly be challenging me very, very hard about why I had disclosed information.
I can't see what information that has been disclosed or the information that has come out since would have collapsed the trial. Is there something there that completely? In fact, what was more likely to collapse the trial would have been all the misinformation and all the rumour mill that was running because of a lack of information. Surely that is the bigger threat.
Yeah, absolutely bang on.
I think he's on rot, cover up.
Well, thank you very much, Paul. Chris from GB News.
2 seconds. I mean, what is it, this information that's come out, that could have jeopardized the trial? Let's go through the things that have come out, all right? So, we know that this person was producing ryosin, okay? So, we knew that, and that's like a fact. Okay, so it's the same as so-and-so was driving down the road in his car and knocked so-and-so over. Those are the facts of the situation. Is that going to prejudice the trial, knowing that? I don't think so, because that's what we know the trial is about. I mean, I don't understand this. Jeff, I'm this. Can you please elaborate?
Some of it just seems to be overkill and really going by the absolute letter of the law and trying to impose it everywhere. And I don't know, it just seems a bit strange to me. I haven't heard anyone come forward and say, cool, if they'd let that piece of information out before the trial, it would have all collapsed. But no one's pointing at any information saying that would have caused it to collapse. Nothing. Unless there's a load of stuff yet to come out, which is not going to come out.
Well, that's what I'm thinking. I was going to move on to that, actually, Jeff,
Sorry.
It seems like something has been hidden here. I mean, call me a conspiracy theorist, Mr. Starmer. Yeah, please continue, Jeff.
Yeah, I'll continue.
Chris Hope, GB News. Prime Minister, given what we know now about the terror link and how it's kept from the public, do you now regret blaming the far right for all those protests last summer? Was it a far right issue, or were some people entitled to be concerned and upset, not the rioters, of course?
Responsibility for the violence lies with them that perpetrated it. I was in Southport the day after these terrible murders. I was acknowledging and thanking the frontline police officers and ambulance who had been at the scene. You can imagine what they had been through. They were back at work the next day. They were saying it was just their job. I could see in their eyes the impact it had had on them, what they had to deal with, what they had to see, how they endured that. As I write back in London,
No, you're absolutely right. The GB News questioner, Christopher Hope, isn't it?
Chopper, yeah.
Chopper, yeah. He said at the end, and not the rioters, of course. He was talking specifically about people with concerns. And now Keir Starmer straight in there, rioters, they were bad, blah, blah. 1 minute, that wasn't what was asked. You're absolutely right.
Same officers were putting their riot gear on and having bricks thrown at them. Those same officers.
Oh, he's just repeating
I don't think
himself.
they'd want-
Rubbish.
Yeah, and the other thing is, of course, that last Saturday, do you remember Saturday when the Met made 77 arrests, was it? Including 77 arrests. I think they've even charged 10 of them. And I think Piers Corbyn was involved in that little lot and all the rest of it. And so was Jeremy Corbyn and various others. There was no riot gear there, was there? When all that unrest was going on. We do seem to have a bit of a two-tier situation here. Anyway, playing on.
Can justify that, nor should they attempt to do so. Thank you, Chris. Harry from The Sun.
Thank you, Prime Minister. Sorry to labour this point, but I think it's important. All summer we were repeatedly told that the Stockport attack was not terror-related, wasn't being treated as terror-related. That wasn't true. Because in October, this monster was charged with a terror offence. Now, information was put into the public domain then that didn't collapse the trial. It didn't jeopardise justice. It was just months later. Now, you say you knew about the ricin and the Al-Qaeda bomb manual and he was known to the authorities. Did you know about that personally at the same time the public, the press, and you and the police were saying this is not terror-related? Because I think that's the nub of the issue and that's what's upset people. You say you couldn't speak out publicly, that you couldn't do that, but didn't the public have a right to know, not least the neighbours who had ricin being produced on their street? Surely they had a right to know.
Oh, dear me. Got him there, didn't he?
Oh,
absolutely. Yeah, there are certain things that people do need to know. And do you remember the press conference when the local chief of police, I can't remember her name, announced all of these extra charges? It looked like they were pulling hen's teeth. That's what it looked like, because you could tell she didn't want to say it. She didn't want to tell us. Anyway, we continue.
I think two separate and important issues there, Harry. The first is on the question of terrorism and what constitutes terrorism. And my concern in this case is that we have clearly got an example of extreme violence, individualised violence, that we have to protect our children from and our citizens from. And it is a new threat.
The way to protect the citizens from it is to ensure that people aren't radicalised in the first place. And the way to do that is build a cohesive society. We're broken. That's the reason. You keep coming back to it.
It's not what we would have usually thought of as terrorism when definitions were drawn up, when guidelines were put in place, when the framework was put in place.
I don't care what they usually thought was terrorism. There was ricin, there was a terrorist manual. How much? I mean, if it looks like a duck, goes quack, has feathers, it probably isn't an effing horse, is it? I mean, for goodness sake, honestly. Look, he's just trying to justify his actions last summer and since. And he's trying to justify the overreaction that he made and his government made and the cover-up that might be potentially going on. We don't know, of course. This is all alleged. I can't say he's doing a cover-up, is he?
Okay.
No, he looks like one, but carry on.
I recognise that here today because I think most people would say, looking at the facts of this case, it's clearly extreme violence. It's clearly intended to terrorise. And I completely accept and understand that, and that is my view. Therefore, we have to make sure that the law and the framework for responding is appropriate to the new threat that we face. And there we will make whatever changes are necessary in the law to deal with it.
You see, without a cohesive society, you've now got these individuals going around. That means that to find these individuals, we need to be monitoring people individually more thoroughly. You see where this is going, don't you? We need to be looking at what you're doing on web. We need to be looking at all your life. We need to have inroads into all your computers. We need to know what you're looking at all the time, because then we can root out these individuals. That's where we're going. This is going to be control. And thank you very much to Alan. Thanks for dissecting this, gents. I could listen to his barrister's defence in what he will say. I could only listen to press questioning. Well, that's what we're trying to do, is sort of, because I know what people, as soon as I watched what this guy was saying, Richard, I said, we need to give them an outlet, you know. Oh, dear. Anyway, I continue.
On the second point, yes, of course, I was kept up to date with the facts as they were emerging. That is usual practice. But just
there, another admission. He knew what was going on.
Like you, as a journalist, I had to observe the law of the land. It was not my personal decision to withhold this information any more than it was a journalist's personal.
Just like Yvette Cooper did, and so many others, when those who were arrested for hurty words online were then branded as far right and guilty. Yeah. Okay.
Not to print or write about it. That is the law of the land that is in place for the reasons I've set out, to protect the integrity of the system, to ensure that the victims and their families get the justice that they deserve. Thank you, Harry. And Jason from the Mail.
Thanks, PM. Jason Gross from the Daily Mail. It sounds from what you're saying like you personally consider this to have been a terrorist attack in the ordinary sense of the word. Is that right? And also, it sounds like you don't think that this is a one-off. Should people be worried? And are we going to need further protections in schools, youth centres? Because this guy seems to have had some sort of obsession with school massacres.
Well, thank you for raising that, because I think this is a really central issue, because, as I say, this is extreme violence, clearly intended to terrorise.
So did you go straight in then, Mr. Starmer? Did you go straight in and provide extra money and protection for dance classes, for schools, etc.? Or did you go to immediately, your first reaction was to protect a certain place of worship? Why did you go there first? Why? Sorry, continue, Jeff.
Concern is that because it is different to the sort of behaviour we've associated with terrorism, Al-Qaeda, and there are plenty of other examples, which tended to be more organised in groups with a clear political ideology and motive. Because it's not that, it is a new and different threat, it doesn't fit as well as it should within our framework, within our toolbox. And that is what we've got to change. That is the urgent question that has to be addressed. And it's one that has to be addressed before the conclusion of the inquiry. And it's why we've already done the learning from the prevent mistakes. But it is that cohort. I do think it's new. You've seen versions of it in America with some of the mass shootings in schools. It is not an isolated, ghastly example. It is, in my view, an example of a different kind of threat. And that is why I'm absolutely so determined that we will rise to that challenge and make sure that our law, our response, is capable, appropriate, and can deal with that sort of threat. But that is my concern, that is my thinking, that this is a new threat, individualised, extreme violence, obsessive, often following online viewing of material from all sorts of different sources. It is not a one-off. It is something that we all need to understand and have a shared undertaking to deal with within our society. And that is not just the laws on terrorism, the framework on terrorism, it's also the laws on what we can access online. We still have rules in place in this country about what you can see.
So do we have a major problem then? I need to know this, Jeff. Do we have a major problem with Buddhist terrorist material being online? Do we have a major problem with that? I haven't as yet encountered...
I haven't ever seen any.
No. And I'm also wondering if the WRVS as well is a very dangerous organisation. The Women's Voluntary Service, and, that you always see in the hospitals, those lovely old ladies. But have you seen any extremist information from them at all?
No.
Online? No, me neither.
Nor have I seen any extremist information in any churches either. Anyway, this is near the end, so I'll just play this bit.
Cinema.
Okay.
And yet online, you can access no end of material. We have to ensure that we can rise to this new challenge, and that is what I'm determined to do. Thank you all very much indeed. Thank you. The senseless...
Right. So there you go, ladies and gentlemen. That was the whole thing. And you can imagine that, I can imagine that a lot of you were getting very, very sort of hot under the collar during some of that, because I definitely did. You know, it's the way he approaches this. It's sort of one-sided, two-tier as normal. He didn't care about the any justice as such for the rioters and the people with hurty words that he threw in jail, and they're still throwing in jail as far as I'm aware. And he, you know, that we had to do all we can to protect certain people, but not others. Yeah.
Yeah, there you go. I don't know how you're all feeling about this. I mean, did you all enjoy it? Okay, here's the question. I'm going to put this to the comment section. How many of you thought that do a hands up? Okay, no, probably not the right question to ask. Tell us if you didn't like that press conference then by Keir Starmer. Just say, I didn't like it if you didn't like it. And I just want to know, because maybe we're just overreacting, Jeff. So if you can say, I didn't like it in the comment section, we'll get an idea of who...
well, one is not amused from Clanlagan. Is there? Yes. Yeah. No, I just find it amazing. His speech sounded more like we've been protecting ourselves in the establishment. Because what he said effectively is we have been protecting ourselves in the establishment for so many years, but it's all going to change now. Yeah, the establishment, all the little the councils, the social services, Westminster, Whitehall, all of these things, MPs, all been protecting themselves, and it's all going to change now. Yeah, I don't believe that for 1 second. Anyway,
yeah, there's a lot of comments here at the moment saying I did not like it. I can't think why that would. You know, what's the matter with you? You know, good grief, everyone.
Yeah. Well, never mind. Anyway,
yes,
we have been online for an hour 20 minutes now, so I think it's about time that I went and had some lunch. It was a bit of a challenge to get this particular one ready on time, so apologies for the delay. But we are going to do something similar with a certain speech that was made yesterday, later on today.
Yes.
Okay, which throws a completely different light on how you construct a country, or reconstruct a country, or make a country great again. So I think you might find that one very interesting.
I can't wait. Jeff, I got to say, this is a video I'm very much looking forward to, because this was when I was dreading doing this one just now. Because I knew how angry I'd be, and sorry if I was a little incoherent at times. That's called anger, and it does overtake the brain. The synapses is fire too fast, and it's like...
Anyway, as Rianne Thomas says, hold up the mirror, Starmer, look at yourself. And so should the rest of the woke establishment that's got us here. And on that note, I will say that it's now good afternoon from me.
And it's good afternoon from him. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Goodbye.
Good afternoon.